So unfortunately, while it was off, I just told you the whole secret of lightness. And I'm not going to repeat it. No, we left Francis with the embracing of that. To me, it's the core, it's the keyhole of his spirituality. And the reason why the Testament is there, it's his last words to the friars. And he's sort of, and I always think saints must die of frustration. Because for them, it's so obvious and it's so present that God is just there. They see it. But everybody's able to see it. It's just that we don't. I went and saw this new movie on the Odyssey. I don't know if you know the story, the Iliad and the Odyssey. And the Odyssey is about Odysseus, his journey back from the Battle of Troy. And it's very interesting. There's one scene where there's one of the gods is with him walking along the way. We would say like almost the guardian angel, that, prompting him and helping him to see the will of God. And one of the things he said, why do the gods, he's Greek, so why do the gods make themselves so obscure? And she said, well, what's obscure about a baby's smile? Who doesn't understand and hear thunder? Who doesn't see the sunrise coming through the rain? I can remember I was walking along, I used to live, before I joined the yacht, I lived up back in Nell, and I used to walk along the beach, and this one night, the sun was setting, of course it sets over water in that direction, and a storm was between us and the darkness of the storm and the rain, and it was just for a moment where the sun came underneath the clouds and the rain, all that rain turned to gold dripping from the sky, and it lit literally every single drop, and it was just a moment. You can miss it in an instant, There's that beautiful line from The Colour Purple, the movie. Remember the movie The Colour Purple? And they're walking through the field. And the field is cosmos. I don't know if you know cosmos. They're very simple flowers, but they're very beautiful. And they're a dark purple, like that's there. And one says to the other, God must be really, upset if someone walks through a field of purple and not recognise that God, it's a gift from God. And that's what the change is. When you put the centre, God as the centre, the perspective lines up and we begin to see. And we see everything through God's eyes. We see the way we were always supposed to see. Because that's what it goes back to original sin. Because what happens is we originally saw that way, and I'll talk more of that in the homily. But the thing is, when we line back up, we realign the perspective. I don't know whether you've ever, if you want perspective, go to the art gallery. And, you see these beautiful pictures of, scenes from Venice. Or I can remember there was one art gallery I went, and there was a picture of, like from the front door of St Peter's Basilica in Rome. And the light coming through was painted. But you could, all it would take was step into it, and the perspective was beautiful. It's like, but when you think about it, what is, in actual fact, what is that painting? That's right. And it only has two dimensions. I don't know, I think it was the painter, but it only has two dimensions. But you see three dimensions. You experience three dimensions. And so the thing is, if that's the reality, is that's what, when you line the perspective up, When you like, because when a painter paints a picture, he has to first find one thing. If he's going to do it, if he's doing abstract, it doesn't matter, you know, you can plot it anywhere, you know, but still a purpose. But the thing is, if you're going to do a good painting, you have to first find one thing. That's right. It's called the vanishing point, where all the lines meet. Where do all the lines meet? There. Everything, our relationship with God, our relationship with each other, meets in the cross. If you were going to sail a ship, like you get a yacht, and you're going to sail a yacht from Sydney to San Francisco. Okay, you get Google Maps out, and it gives you a direct line. And when you sail off, that line is actually not on the sea, you know. So how do you find your way? If you leave Sydney and there's a line that goes to San Francisco, if you leave Sydney and you're half a degree off, so that might be 6 metres here, by the time you get to San Francisco, it could be 2,000 kilometres. Or even end up in, you know, Guatemala or something like that, Costa Rica. And then you'll never find your way back. But the thing is, that's what and so our life is a little bit like that. So on the sea, how do you find where you are? A compass, yes, that's one way. How did Captain Cook find his way to Australia? When you didn't know his looking at the stars. But he had some other thing. A sextant. And so a sextant could help you. There's 2 grids on the world that they've worked out. Latitude and longitude. So it's the lines going this way and the lines going that way. You need both to find out exactly where you are. You know, the latitude of Adelaide is exactly the same as the latitude of San Diego in California, except in north. So when I went there to work in California, they said, "What's it like coming to California?" I said, "There's something very depressing about spending 17 hours on the plane to come to a place that looks exactly like where you live." Because the climate in California is exactly the same as South Australia. They even have eucalyptus trees, gum trees there everywhere. So the lining up of north and south and east and west, and you can find exactly where you are. And the thing is, you keep coming back to that point. And that's what our journey of our prayer life is keep coming back and realigning. What is the great realigner of our life in the Catholic Church that helps us to find the point where we are?
The sacrament of reconciliation.
Yes, that's what it is. When we go off course, reconciliation helps us. And the thing is, a lot of people think perhaps they have to go to reconciliation. Well, you have to get your coordinates if you're going to get to San Francisco from Melbourne, from Sydney. Because there's no line on the sea. There's no highway and there's no green signs telling you where to go. You have to work by other coordinates. And this country was discovered by a man who was a magnificent sailor who was looking for the great Southland. So, and you know, that's another story altogether. And that's what, when our life gets lost, when we feel lost, when we feel like we're going off course or we're going off course, reconciliation is the gift from God to realign us back up. And the great realignment of our life is the cross. And the thing is, I could give a talk just on the importance of the cross. But of course, that's what, in the end, really focused Francis. And how do you remember that? How do you people who live here remember that? Look, out the front of this church, there is a statue that was put there by the Capuchin friars for some reason. What's that statue? Tell me about that statue. So what's happening? Jesus is on the cross. He's got one hand. Now tell me, is Francis helping Jesus off the cross? Or is Jesus helping Francis onto the cross? The latter. That's right. Because that's what Francis's thing is. Where we start where we left off, Francis opened that door. What helped him to open the door that was shut in his heart was the embracing of heaven, was receiving the gift that he was given from God. The Lord granted me, Brother Francis, to begin to do penance in this way, to begin to enter into a deep relationship with God in this way, while I was in sin. So he didn't say, Francis didn't write, the Lord granted me, Brother Francis, to begin to do penance in this way. While I was in sin, he got me to do a theology degree at Notre Dame University over 5 years, and then I did my master's, and then I became a doctor. And as I went through that, no. While I was in sin, it seemed bitter for me to see lepers. But the most incredible, I spent my entire novitiate reflecting on this phrase, live here. Why is this person in my life? And why do I have these thoughts that will put me into jail for the rest of my life? And we think, oh no, that's, Francis never thought that. Oh my God. Francis couldn't think that. But why did the Lord lead him to the thing he found most bitter in his life? Now you think, okay, where is the bitterness in your life? Oh no, Father, I have no bitterness. It's like the lady that, the priest was talking about, love your enemies. And he said, everybody put their hand up who's got enemies. They all did except for Mavis sitting at the front. And I said, Mavis, why haven't you got, tell us. Mavis, tell us why you have no enemies. She said, easily, I outlive the bastards. That wasn't the answer Father was looking for. But the thing is, think of what you find bitter. Because that's where the Lord is, you're going to find the Lord. And that's what Francis found when he opened that door. The Lord himself led him to the thing that was keeping the door shut, that was keeping him focused on himself. So that changing of the perspective is like moving a building around to face 180 degrees. Imagine we try to move this so that, it's huge. And what we're doing is we're shifting our ego. We're shifting the centre of our attention. We're moving it away. Have you ever heard of a man called Copernicus? Okay, in English, I think we still have it, although my world is disappearing that I grew up in very quickly. The Copernican Revolution. Do you know what that was? No. So Copernicus, his family, were glass makers, right? And I don't remember dates enough, but it's in the 1500s, the 1400s, 1500s, they were glass makers. And they started making lenses, right? This is to remind me, so that's B. Lenses, and with that, he also started making the first telescope. So he made a telescope so he could see, and then he began to see, he could see the moon, right? And also he was a mathematician because he had to be a mathematician to make the shape of the lens in glass. Then he began looking at what they used to call movable stars. We know them today as planets, but they had the stars that sit there, and then there's the stars that move, and we know them as planets. So he over many, many months, and probably years, he tracked different ones of the planets. And so mathematically he worked them out. He realised that if you put it down, the maths, it actually is going to do a circle or an eclipse, what's the word? No, the planet goes around. Yeah, the orbit. And so the thing is, he got a certain amount, and you can actually say, well, okay, if you kick this course, it's going to... So he said, well, if it's going around something, I'll make the centre and I can work out the rest. So he did the Earth as the centre because everybody thought the Earth was the centre of the universe. The sun went around, the moon, everything goes around. And if you stand out and look, that's what happens. The sun rises and it sets, the moon rises and it sets. The stars, when I used to shut the place, the Hawthorne, St Anthony's, the Southern Cross would be over here. At 6 a.m. in the morning I open it, it's turned on its head and it's over there. I think it moved during the night, obviously. But then when he made the Earth the centre, the sums didn't add up. It didn't make any sense. So he said, perhaps there's a different centre. He made the sun the centre, the perspective. Now, how do you tell a world that it's not the Earth, it's the Earth that's moving, not the sun? Because everything, the understanding of the whole world was locked into that vision. The theology of the time was locked into that vision. But mathematically, he could prove it. So he had great deal of trouble. Galileo came along, and others came along. Gradually, it was understood. That's a Copernican revolution. The centre must change. A lot of the time, we think we're the centre of the world. But in actual fact, when you change the gravitational centre, everything else, like Copernicus' sums, click into place. And that's what makes a saint. That's what made Francis. And the thing is, once you see it, you can't unsee it. One of the things I love to do is when the moon rises, is to sit, I'm lucky I can sit on my front veranda and the power lines on the other side. I sit and watch the moon through the power lines. I sit still and you can see the moon moving. Is the moon moving? No. If you hold the moon, you can feel the earth moving. You can be aware of it if you like. So you're swapping the perspective. I don't know if you've ever seen a movie where they've had the slow motion of the stars at night, you know, and you watch it in the movie. Well, all the stars are wiggling in. Well, what you've got to do is when you see that, you've got to hold the stars and feel the movement. That's when you get it. So it's swapping the centre. That's what our prayer is. That's what reconciliation is. That's what our life is. That's what the Mass is all about. And then once we get that, everything starts the perspective. It moves from our life moves from a Picasso painting to a beautiful picture where all perspective comes into place. But you know what? We've got to keep doing it again and again. That's why reconciliation is repeated. That's why we come to Mass every week. That's why we pray every day. Because the force of that gravitational pull back to us as the centre is very strong. And we can't do it ourselves. In actual fact, the only thing that can change it is the death of a God. And that's what changed it. And the thing is, it goes back, that gravitational perspective goes back to original sin. Because the thing is, when they sinned, they discovered they were naked where they were before. So what it was that where they were before, everything was in perspective. And it was beautiful. And original sin disturbed and moved that perspective. They become self-conscious. So, and we have to, and it's only through Christ and the power of the resurrection that he can move that back around. And that's what Francis is talking about. Allowing God. It's allowing God to do this. A lot of time we think we've got to do it. No, we just have to see things as they really are. And we have to work with that balance. One of the things that I do, and I've been gifted with, actually this is the Lord let himself let me know. Around the year 2000, I shifted from Brisbane down to Sydney. And the house that we had was a bit like a bigger version of the Priory here. My room was on the back and it had a stairwell out the back and down. I parked the car down there and I carried boxes up and down and then I got in the car and drove all the way to Sydney in one day. And I got to Sydney, got to bed, slept. I woke up in the morning and I couldn't get out of bed. My back had, well, I say my back's gone, I bet it was still there, but it wasn't. It didn't work. And anyway, I went to physio and things like that, and nothing. And so one of them actually made me even worse. One guy just said, look, you've got to learn to swim. You've got to go swimming, and you have to swim with a snorkel. Well, I learned to swim as a kid, and I went to the pool with a snorkel. I was reluctant to go to the pool because I thought you had to have some Adonian body, like you had to look like a Greek god before you could actually go to the pool. Actually, the first day I went to the pool, I realised that idea was completely wrong, and I actually felt good about myself. No, sorry. And we swam, and I couldn't swim even more. 10 metres, I was exhausted. And I did it 3 times a week for 3 months. Until one day, this little boy swam past me like a minute. What's he doing that I'm not doing? You know? And so the thing is, what happened is all of a sudden, when I reflected on it, I realised that I was holding myself up the water. And it seems strange that you've got a snorkel on, so I was kind of under the water anyway. But when I was swimming, all my energy was holding myself up in the water, right? And I thought, that's must be locking all my energy into this. So I thought, what if I just let go and see what happens? And of course, when I started swimming, I let go, and exactly what I thought was going to happen happened. I began to sink. But not as far as that tube that was still above the water. So I let go, and I realised that the water, through the physics and through the fact that I kept swimming, the water was holding me up. That very night I swam 200 metres. I am so lucky that whenever things get tough, I go swimming and I let go. And what happens is I enter into this relationship with our sister water, and I have to keep moving, you have to let go. And it's the most amazing feeling. Next time you go on a plane, do this, okay? As the plane takes off, relax and feel. What is happening when the plane takes off? What's the physics of what's happening? Do you know? Yeah, it could be. The shape of the wings is like this. And so when the plane moves along, it creates like a bit of a vacuum on here. And so the thing is, because nature abhors a vacuum, the air pressure pushes it up. A lot of people think, okay, it's the jet engines that's making me go up. No, the jet engine's making me go along. So it creates the vacuum that pushes you up. So relax and feel yourself being pushed up by the energy of the universe, by the fact that we live in an atmosphere. That, my dear brothers and sisters, is the difference. It's seeing God is the same way. It's actually there, but we actually miss it. The beautiful poem of Francis Thompson, the drift of pinions, would we hearken, beats at our own clay-shuttered doors. Does the fish soar to find the ocean? Does the eagle plunge to find the air? Write it down and meditate on these words. And that's what he's saying. The whole poem is about how God is with us all the time. He's always knocking on this door. And all these saints open the door. But what we're talking about today is the way in which Francis opened it. And he opened it at the invitation of God. And he realised that that invitation was a gift. The Lord granted it. But he responded to that gift. That's what we've got to come. I dare not get into music because we've got a Mass to do. So let's prepare for the Mass. And don't forget, after the Mass, we'll have afternoon tea, lunch, supper, and breakfast for tomorrow. What we need to be not scrap